Okay. Am I audible also?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. So, Dr. Hemant Mehta has already covered in some detail the approach to central venous stenosis. So, what I will be doing is only to illustrate some of the problems with cases. So, this is one of my early cases, a 72-year-old diabetic ESRD who started dialysis in 2014. And like most patients, he started with a non-tunneled, non-cuffed, non-tunnel catheter and then had a left brachiocephalic fistula constructed. He developed an infection and the catheter was removed. Then he used a femoral catheter. Then he used a left internal jugular non-cuffed catheter. And in February 2015, he developed swelling of the left upper limb and his AV fistula became unusable because of that. He went back to a left double lumen femoral catheter, developed deep vein thrombosis and staphylococcal septicemia, at which time he came to KEM. This is what his arm looked like, the fistula arm. There was a good thrill and a bruit present over the fistula, but the arm was so swollen that it was impossible to see or feel a vein which could be cannulated at this point of time. Of course, he initially went to the ICU. He required noradrenaline support, vancomycin and amikacin for his staphylococcal septicemia. We diagnosed him with a temp catheter to begin with. And once he had stabilized, I was able to puncture the fistula vein with ultrasound guidance and do an angiogram. And by bringing a catheter, as Dr. Mehta had shown earlier, up to the left brachiocephalic vein, this is the brachiocephalic vein, and there is a long segment of stenosis over here. The vein had a diameter of about 11 millimeters, and the stenotic segment was down to about 1 millimeter. Fortunately, it was easy to cross this with a Terumo glide wire and then plasty it with a 12 millimeter balloon, and this was a very gratifying result. Even more so, 48 hours after doing this, this is the state of the patient's arm. And here we can now see a nicely cannulatable cephalic vein. And this was a lucky one because 2 years later, when I last saw him in 2019, his fistula continued to be usable. This illustrates what happens, and this is from I've taken the figure from the CKD Registry of India report in 2012 that 61% of patients in India get diagnosed at stage 5 and undergo emergency dialysis. Many of them would enter ICUs, they use rigid temporary catheters and then continue with those catheters until an AVF is created and becomes usable. There is a lack of screening. Frequently, the permanent access gets lost in patients. They then use a rigid catheter again as a bridge. They have multiple episodes of infection and eventually end up with central venous stenosis. This is not one of my own cases, but one which I found very interesting. It was reported way back in 2001 in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it was an atypical presentation. This was in the case records of the Massachusetts General Hospital, and they called it the effusion that would not go away. They investigated this patient's left pleural effusion in all manner of ways, looked for malignancy, looked for autoimmune disorders, looked for storage disorders, and could not find anything, and the effusion kept recurring. Ultimately, by going back to the history, they came to know that this patient had had a left subclavian central line catheter inserted 16 years earlier and many years later developed an effusion as the only presentation. The venous pressures were high, and once an angioplasty was done, it resolved. This is another patient of mine. She started dialysis in 2013 with a right internal jugular temporary catheter. A left radiocephalic AVF was attempted, it failed. We then put in a right cuff tunnel catheter, used it for 7 months, made a left brachiocephalic AV fistula, and since that became usable, we then removed the tunnel catheter. In May 2016, she began to develop a prolonged bleeding after needle removal. So we normally do not put tourniquets on our fistulas, just 10 minutes of pressure. But in this situation, the patient began using a tourniquet after her dialysis was terminated. And when we checked, her venous pressure was 240 millimeters of mercury at a 300 ml blood flow with 16 gauge needles. Her dialysis was fairly well preserved, the adequacy. There was no swelling of the arm, warmth, or redness, but there was an aneurysmal dilatation seen proximal to the elbow. And as Dr. Mehta showed in the arm raising test, this segment did not collapse. So we took this patient for an angiography, and it would be very tempting to believe that this is the culprit lesion. You can see the aneurysmal dilatation here, and there is a stenotic segment. But if you look up here, there is also a stenosis in the cephalic arch vein and also in the left subclavian vein seen in the image on the right hand side. So what this patient required was an angioplasty of all three lesions, which was done. Fortunately, they were soft lesions, just about 8 atmospheres of pressure was good enough to open them up. Her venous pressures came down to 180. The tourniquets disappeared until a year later. She once again had a recurrence of high pressures and bleeding, and again tourniquets. And this time she had multiple collaterals seen over her shoulder, chest wall, and neck. So we did a repeat angiogram, and what we found was that the lesions had recurred. And this time the lesion is tighter. Both these lesions are worse than they had been before, and they needed higher pressures this time to open them up. But fortunately, this is the balloon here, and there's a waist there. This is at about 12 to 14 atmospheres. It opened up eventually at 16 atmospheres of pressure, and the patient resumed the use of her fistula. It lasted for 2 years this time, and again in October last year, she began using tourniquets to staunch bleeding. The venous pressures went up to 220, and I did an angiogram expecting that the lesions would have recurred. But this is what I found on this occasion. The subclavian vein is fine, the cephalic arch was fine, but there was a complete occlusion of the left brachiocephalic vein beyond this point. So I was able to fortunately use a catheter. This is the roadmap, and using a real-time roadmap image and a catheter, I was able to get a wire across this lesion. This is the balloon dilatation that we did. We went with a 10 mm balloon here, and the result was very gratifying. It needed a high pressure, about 18 to 20 atmospheres to open it, but a complete opening, and she continues to use her fistula till today. This is the case of a 28-year-old woman, CKD5D. In March 2018, she started dialysis, as so many of them do, with a temporary catheter. She then had a right radiocephalic AVF, used it from that's not 2019, that's 2018, for 3 months. Then it failed, and she went for a left radiocephalic, primary failure. Once again, went back to a right IJV temporary catheter, which was removed in November for catheter-related bloodstream infection. She used a left femoral for 1 week, and then an attempt was made to reinsert a right IJV catheter, but there was a resistance to the guide wire. So what the operator did was to insert a very high catheter puncturing near the angle of the mandible, and said that there was a venous blood backflow in from the catheter. But when the patient was taken for dialysis, she had a very poor flows, less than 100 ml, about 80 ml, with venous pressures going up to 150 millimeters of mercury at pressures of 80. And that's when she came to us, and I punctured the jugular lower than the catheter, and it looks on first sight that this is fine. There is a free passage of contrast through the sheath which I have inserted, but this is the outline of the heart, and no contrast is entering the heart at all. And it's on the contrary, this vessel is going down below the diaphragm. So I took a lateral shoot, and what you can see is this is the SVC, and it is completely occluded. This is the temporary catheter, which is lying right at the tip of it, is lying right at that occluded segment, and it is the azygous vein which has dilated and filled up and is crossing the diaphragm, as is the internal mammary. So all the drainage is through collaterals to the azygous, to the internal mammary, and there is a complete occlusion of the SVC at this point of point. And when we passed a guide wire through the sheath and were able to cross it, now you can see the divergence of the two. So here is the guide wire. It is continuing through the SVC. It continues to the right atrium and goes into the right ventricle, and side by side, from my sheath, I was able to inject contrast, and I can see where the azygous vein, which is carrying the flow, is. I needed a 20 mm balloon to dilate this, and one of the things I found, a 20 mm balloon, as Dr. Beg said earlier, your balloon has to be, the sheath has to be sized to the balloon that you want to pass, and the 20 mm balloon required a 10 French sheet, which I did not have available. So since this patient was going to require a cuff tunnel catheter, what I did was to insert the sheath of the cuff tunnel catheter, which is a large sheath. It's about 14 French. So when I was able to insert the cuff tunnel, the the sheath of the catheter, then I could pass a 20 mm balloon, and this is the tight waist here. It needs opened up eventually, and then after removing the balloon, okay, this is the balloon. There's a shoulder here, there's a waist here, so multiple points of stenosis. And now here the vein has dilated, and now contrast is seen to enter the right atrium. In this view, this is the sheath through which the same sheath and over the same guide wire, I was now able to pass in a cuff tunnel catheter, peel away the sheath, and I have a patient with a cuff tunnel catheter and an opened SVC and good flow. So that opens the question, should all central venous lesions be treated? Well, they have to be treated if they are severe and disabling. KDOQI and the European best practice guidelines say that percutaneous intervention is that of choice with a technical success rate ranging from 70 to 90%. If it is symptomatic, then the complete outflow tract should be imaged and appropriate intervention done. So a patient who has cerebral venous hypertension, symptomatic arm, neck or face swelling, the SVC syndrome, a progressive aneurysmal dilatation of the axis, significant static venous pressure, prolonged bleeding after dialysis will require an intervention. I like this study of Levitz, which followed up 38 lesions on which 12 of which there was no intervention done and 26 were plastied. When they followed them up of the untreated lesions, 4 improved, 4 remained stable, and 4 progressed, and none of them really needed any intervention. Of the ones which were treated, 26 that were treated, there was no, 62 were treated and 26 were followed up. 3 improved, but 23 progressed despite treatment, and 1 of them developed arm swelling, 4 developed additional stenosis, and 4 of them subsequently needed intervention. There were questions earlier about if we intervene, what can we expect? These are studies going from the late 1990s to early 2000s, and the rates at that rate were really not good. Primary patency of a pure angioplasty at 2-year patency was barely 10%. Secondary patencies, however, have improved, and now the secondary patencies, 1-year secondary patency is more than 80%, and 2-year about 65%. This is a summary of all the studies that have looked at interventions for central vein stenosis. 9 studies on percutaneous angioplasty, 10 on bare metal stents, and 5 on stent grafts. And these are the 6-month primary patency rates. 57, 61. Stent grafts do better, around 77%, and they also do better with assistant patencies going up to about more than 90%. So do I intervene in all cases? This is a patient who came to me for a cuff tunnel catheter because he had exhausted his limb accesses. He was a young boy. I think he was about 17 years old, and 2 failed fistulas, 1 in each arm. When I punctured the internal jugular vein, I simply could not pass a guide wire. When I injected contrast through the sheath, there was a complete occlusion here. There was no way to get beyond the head of the clavicle, and there was this huge collateral which was as large as the internal jugular vein. It measured close to 1 centimeter in diameter, and all the contrast was draining through that from the rather than the occluded internal jugular. So what I did was, this patient wasn't willing for an angioplasty, and it would have been a difficult one unless one came from the femoral. I punctured the collateral here, passed a guide wire through the collateral, which could then bypass this occluded segment of IJV, and passed a cuff tunnel catheter through the collateral all the way into the right atrium, and it is still functioning pretty well. This is a patient of my own. He started off on maintenance hemodialysis in 2010. He had a very short use of a right internal jugular, switched to a radiocephalic left-sided fistula. The AVS thrombosed a year later. He then had a right radiocephalic which failed, went to a right brachiocephalic which was used for about 2 months, and then he developed progressive swelling, bleeding, and skin discoloration, and an angiogram showed a right subclavian total occlusion. So a stent was placed in the right subclavian, the symptoms resolved, and he resumed dialysis from his AVF. Till about a year later, he developed again swelling of the fistular limb and prolonged bleeding and high venous pressures. So I did an angiography through the fistula, and what it showed is, here's the stent, it's in place, but there is no flow of blood, of contrast through the stent. The advantage of having a stent there is you can go with a roadmap, attempt to pass a guide wire and you would know immediately when your guide wire stays within the stent. But here, my guide wire initially began turning from the cephalic arch through the subclavian and into the axillary. Using a guiding catheter, I was able to rectify that, get through across the stent, use a 12 balloon, plasty the stent, and here there's still a lesion here, there's a stenosis. So once again a plasty, and then it's better. There's a rapid flow because the fistula was a high flow fistula. So there's a rapid dissipation of contrast and the lesion has opened up. So this was September 2017, opened up the lesion. He did well, and 6 months later, March 2018, again the same symptoms, and there's once again a narrowing of this point. So once more, I got a guide wire across it, dilated it, and once again opened it up. Yeah, this was a very tight lesion here, but it opened up. And he did well, but in July 2018. So now what was happening is at progressively shorter intervals, the patient was requiring an intervention. And I had to go in July 2018, multiple points of stenosis. The tightest of them is here, opened it up. Once again, it opened, but 3 months later, the symptoms recurred, and this time the patient wasn't willing for an angioplasty. Dr. Mehta referred to the case that if you place a stent in the subclavian, ensure that you do not occlude the lumen or the opening of the left brachiocephalic. It wasn't, so we were able to place a cuff tunnel catheter from the left brachiocephalic, from the left internal jugular, and he did well with that. So summarizing the patency, I showed this already, so I can go past. So I just thought I'd bring in this. It's a patient who came in with multiple uses of both internal jugular veins. His right internal jugular had no flow. It was completely thrombosed. And this is the ultrasound picture of the left internal jugular vein. Now, what it shows is that there appears to be some lesion there, but there is patent vein on either side. And the Doppler shows flow on both sides at the central void. Our residents punctured it, but they found that the catheter kept going to the opposite subclavian. So I took the patient to the cath lab. I punctured the internal jugular, put in a sheath, and what I found was a holdup of contrast here and a trickle into the SVC and right atrium. So I tried to pass a guide wire under the roadmap, and this is what was happening. My guide wire refused, even though there's a patent SVC here, my guide wire refuses to go there. What it does is to turn and go up in this way, and beyond this point, it could neither move forward upwards nor would it come down, no matter how I manipulated it. So I pulled my sheath back, and then I was able to take a fresh pathway and my guide wire passed down. So what I was seeing here was a fibrin sheath. And when I click this, when I couple this image that I can see here with a holdup of contrast, you can see it filling the sheath over here, and the guide wire is passing from the side of the sheath, and that ultrasound image, I knew that we were dealing with a fibrin sheath. So back into the fibrin sheath we went, angioplastied it, and then passed a catheter. My last case, and this is one which I think Dr. Khanna alluded to the fact that one will get complications and need to know how to manage them. So this is a subclavian stenosis which I was attempting to plasty, and just as I got my wire across and was congratulating myself, the guiding catheter tip broke and sailed away down the guide wire. Fortunately, it came to rest over here. Now, one possibility would be to pull the catheter back, put in a snare it and bring it out, but there was a chance that when pulling it back that it would sail further down the guide wire or even off it. So what my cardiologist showed me was to do this. We took a 2 balloon, passed the balloon through the catheter, a coronary balloon, get the coronary balloon here. The coronary balloon, uninflated, goes through the tip of that guiding catheter. Then we inflated it so that it caught the catheter tip, pulled it back here, and then remove the whole assembly through the sheath and then start all over again. So to summarize, central venous stenosis is a complication of device use. The left brachiocephalic, probably because of the way the catheter rests in the vein, is the more frequent site for stenosis. Asymptomatic lesions are brought to light when a fistula, ipsilateral fistula is placed. All lesions may not require treatment. Angioplasty and stent use equally good results, and both of them require repeat procedures to maintain patency. Thank you.